My name is Dave Weber, and I am a proud member of the class of 1983, celebrating our 25th reunion. That would be this name tag, but I've also had the good fortune for 22 of those last 25 years since graduation to work here at MIT Sloan. So that would be this little name tag, which means I'm actually on duty today, too. And it's a real pleasure for me to be your host, your tour guide, your cruise director, your Sherpa for this Back to the Classroom experience today. It's a wonderful opportunity to have a chance to reconnect with great faculty who you might have had in the classroom. How many of you have had the pleasure of having Roberto Rigobon, our first? Wow. Lots of you are seated here in the splash zone, I see, so you will be cheering him on. That's great. No, seriously, Back to the Classroom is a wonderful time to reconnect with folks that you have had in the classroom, to hear about new ideas from folks that have come to Sloan on our faculty since you've graduated, and really to kind of experience the frontiers of management and what's happening here on a current basis. And we're so happy to see all of you back here today to experience that. We've got a wonderful lineup of speakers throughout the day, and I think you'll see a diversity of themes, different areas of the schools represented, and we also have a special treat that we've started to incorporate in the program, and that's having an alumni speaker back, as well as the faculty. So we'll get into that when I introduce Brad following Roberto. Hopefully, in fact, I'm certain that you will find today's sessions certainly stimulating, certainly entertaining, no doubt about it. If you haven't had your caffeine yet, no worries, you don't have to dash out. Roberto is going to keep you, he'll get you awake, he'll keep you awake. Stimulating, entertaining, and definitely rejuvenating. And that's part of what Reunion is about, reconnecting with each other, but also reconnecting with the school, hearing about what's going on in our classrooms, in our laboratories across MIT, and of course here at Sloan, a lot of times those laboratories are the real world, and Roberto is a great example of that. In a second, you'll hear. And finally, really getting a chance to hear about what's happening at MIT Sloan, and more importantly, what our graduates, what our faculty, our current students are doing that's impacting the world in great, great ways. Now, let me turn for a second to Roberto. And if you looked at the Boston Globe this morning, day of economic shocks for the U.S. So Roberto is the consummate economist. He's a fabulous teacher. The things he talks about are not always positive. In fact, there's a lot of gloom and doom out there, but I think we'll come out of it with a spirit of optimism, and certainly we'll be entertained and we're going to learn something. Roberto, as you might know, so many of you raise your hands, he's one of our most popular professors here at Sloan. He's a fabulous teacher. Also does wonderful research, and we were talking a little earlier this week, and he said, Dave, you know, this is great. Finally, my research is actually relevant. Now, you know, MIT has a very, very strong tradition of world-class economists. We've had 4 or 5 Nobel laureates from this end of campus in the economics field. We've just traded off one chief economist from the World Bank. Simon Johnson is coming back, which we're happy about, and Olivier Blanchard is heading down to take his place. We've had our prior dean, Dick Schmalens, he was on the Economic Board of Advisors. Kristen Forbes has been there. And Roberto is, he's talking to central bankers a lot lately, I think, and I'm sure he's going to touch on that in his talk this morning. A bit of personal background. You all have his academic bios in the programs. But Roberto is a very interesting guy outside of here. I stopped by his office the other day, and his door was closed, which isn't necessarily typical, and his assistant says, it's okay, you can go in, but you're going to hear a lot of music. I said, okay. So I kind of shuffled over to the door and danced my way in, and there's Roberto, you know, the headsets on, everything. You think, well, he's a music fan. Well, he's more than that. He's more than a music fan. If you go to his website, you will see that he has a rock band. Not only is it a rock band of great music, but his 3 kids are involved in that rock band. And I don't know if this means that the economy is even worse than the Globe talks about, and he's looking for a second job. But if you go to the website, there's an opportunity to do some free downloads, but there are some commercial aspects as well, and I think you would enjoy seeing the work that he and his kids have put together. So in another walk of life beyond music, he is also a coach. And coming from Venezuela, you might say, well, there's a couple of sports he might be involved in. But in fact, it's not baseball, it's soccer. And by his own admission, he is a great coach of the worst team in Massachusetts. And you know, this is not self-deprecating humor. I actually checked. They are. No doubt about it. And as he said, we're Division 4 only because there's no Division 5. But indeed, it probably is because Venezuela tends to be more of a baseball country than the rest of Latin America, which is just passionate about soccer, although there was a big soccer game last night that he might touch on as well in his remarks, so we'll have to see. Let me just say that it is a real pleasure to have Roberto kicking us off this morning. So please join me. Wait, 1 second. One more update to your program. It lists Roberto as associate professor, but in addition to welcoming to the podium, I'd like you to join me in congratulating full professor Roberto Rigobon, who was just promoted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, in fact, yesterday was a soccer game in Foxborough between Brazil and Venezuela. And I took all my kids to the soccer game. And this is the first time in history that Venezuela won the game, actually. And everybody, even my son, I'm from Venezuela, so even my son roots for Brazil. So they were all very disappointed. They said, "Oh my God, all your teams always lose all your games except the one we want you to lose." So yes, we have our second to last game today, and through the email, the kids are saying, "We hope we only lose 5-0 today." Oh, they have great spirit. Anyway, so thank you so much for that introduction. Let me start talking today about some of my research. It's true what Dave said. I think this for the first time ever, my research is relevant. Not by construction, I think it was mostly by mistake. 3.5 years ago, I started studying how a financial crisis could occur because we were trading credit risk derivatives. And it started because the Bank of International Settlements contacted me and said, "Roberto, you are the most depressing individual in the history of humankind. And you always see the future so gloomy. But everything looks so good. But we would like to have kind of, equal opportunity in a conference in Cambridge. Cambridge, the communist one, I mean the one in England. So they said, "We want you to have this very, very gloomy view of the world because everybody is just partying and they just love so much the future. It would be nice to have a very negative view." So they said, "So how a crisis will take place?" And I remember I started studying this market, and I was appalled by how easy it was to get into a financial collapse. And I remember I started the conference representing this horrible view of the world. I was like, "Please move to Mars, no? The world will come to a collapse." So everybody laughs. They said, "Oh, this is Roberto being Roberto. It's okay, he's always so gloomy." So we met every April. And next year we meet in April and said, "Well, Roberto, you were all wrong. Do you want to change your views?" "No, this is horrible." Next April. "Oh, Roberto, do you want to change your view? You're so Venezuelan, obviously. And everything's so negative. How was about Chavez?" And, Last April, I was received as a genius in that conference. They said, "You were so right." I said, "Yeah, of course. I always knew it." And 2 years ago, I thought about inflation a lot. And I started thinking that central banks, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Fortunately, I cannot show you everything. This is incredibly confidential data that the statistical offices have provided me. But we'll talk a little bit about that. But 2 years ago, I started thinking about how unfair we do policy in countries in general. And the main reason was central banks are concerned with a very particular part of inflation. Central banks, when they compute the inflation and when they are trying to control the economy, central banks look at something that they call core inflation. Have you ever heard that word, core inflation? No? Well, core inflation is the inflation rate that has no food and no energy. So they compute the inflation excluding food and energy. I say, well, you know, kind of, I don't know if you have lately have seen that maybe energy is increasing and food is increasing. But more importantly, depending on your status, depending on your income, the proportion of food and energy on your basket is very different. Individuals that consume a lot of food and a lot of energy are usually the low-income individuals in the society, no? So 2.5 years ago, I started talking to my friends in central banks. At that time, I had the five presidents of central banks in Latin America were very close friends of mine. So I was very upset with them because I said, you are supposed to be my friend. Don't you have a consulting activity you can hire for me? I mean, like $1 million, something like that, that can clearly improve my standard of living. And they said, no. I said, but you are all corrupt in Chile. I mean, corruption, friendship. And no. Say, I will not tell, I promise you. And, no. And then I asked for data. So they provided me with data. So, but the way I started talking about food inflation was to understand whether or not central banks are taking care of their citizens. You know, a central bank is an institution that should respond to us. They have an obligation to us, as citizens. So are they responding to us? And if not, to whom in the society they are responding? No? They have a job to do, which is to take care that we don't lose the value of our income. That our currency, our income is stable. That our prices are stable. And the fact that they concentrate on a very particular inflation that doesn't include food and energy is worrisome. By the way, core inflation doesn't include computers either, which is kind of weird. So they exclude computers, food, and energy. Talking about doing things wrong for a long time, no? So what I want to do today is to kind of summarize a little bit of the learning of that, describe. This is a very particular situation of the world that we're facing, and what I will describe a little bit on both issues. On the US recession, that has to do a lot with the subprime crisis, and to food prices. So in fact, if you have ever taken class with me, you know that I had never used slides, no? This will be very weird for you. In fact, the people from AV said, are you going to use a computer? They didn't even bring the computer. They said, Roberto is presenting, are you crazy? He has never used computers. In fact, Julia here, when I saw her this morning, she said, wow, Roberto, you still have the same shirt. This is my 10th year reunion. I said, yeah, and the same jeans too. I'm glad she didn't ask for underwear anyway. So there's two big problems on Earth right now. Two huge problems. And the fact that they, again, as I said before, it coincides with the stuff that I'm studying right now is mostly about mistake, not because of the design. So first is the subprime crisis in the United States. And what I want to do a little bit is to talk about the response. This has been a kind of a long recession and a long process of deterioration in the United States. It's very strange. Usually we're far more pragmatic. If you think about the United States, the way we responded to September 11 was very forcefully. At least economic, forget about military actions. Economically, we acted very forcefully and very clearly. The subprime crisis has been lingering for a while. We're kind of not acting, no? We're just allowing this sector to destroy and self-destruct itself. So it's very interesting because our response has been very different from the past. But the second one is that inflation is back. I remember if I were to talk about inflation 3 years ago in my class, people said, oh yeah, that stuff that happened in the past. Yes, I remember. In fact, Harvard cases talk about the hyperinflation on Germany in 1926, because I mean, it has been so long since we have had ever inflation. People don't even remember. Yeah, I remember, I learned that word. Yeah, how is that spelled exactly, with or without an H? I don't know. So, but what has happened lately is that inflation is back, and is back with a vengeance. I would say that 3/4 of the inhabitants on Earth will have more than 10% of inflation this August. This has not happened since 1974, 1975. It's a unique time. But it's back in countries like Europe, a continent. The whole continent is actually facing a lot of inflation. It's getting close on average to 4, depending on your country. So if you're from Spain, I mean, you know Spanish, they always like to exaggerate everything, so it's close to 6 or 7. Irish is 6 to 7. Germans is getting close to 3.5. That has never happened since the Second War. So furthermore, what is occurring is that emerging markets, very successful countries like India, that are growing very fast, China, Middle East, all of them, when you measure inflation properly, which is my research, they're all above 10% right now, already. Latin American countries, we used to have 3% 3 years ago. We have more than 6% on average right now. And some countries, they're shooting out of the roof. Like, you know, Argentina, Venezuela, they're already at 25. So this is, we have 2 issues. One is recession, which means that we're going to produce less, but second, inflation. Now, the clear representation that this has become an issue is when this makes it to the, you know, the source of world wisdom, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So first, recession. It's very interesting. When we had problems in the September 11, I'd like to use the case of September 11 to understand how we in the United States reacted to that recession. Because the way we react is exactly the way a textbook economist will tell you, you have to do things, no? September 11 had an impact first on consumers' confidence and fears. We in the United States and we in the world felt less safe than before. That implies that there's a component of the recession that is aggregate. It's affecting everybody, not only the individuals in New York, but everybody is being affected. And for global shocks, you need global measures. Every single central bank on earth lowered interest rates within a week. We also, the September 11 has sectorial crisis. There are some sectors that will be affected more than others. Airline industry, for example, was incredibly affected. We have to rebuild those. So we use fiscal policy to help those sectors. Third, and very important, after a recession, you have to have a message of control. You cannot start by saying, oh, well, I don't know what's going to happen with the banking sector. This is, I mean, my dad is Argentinian, okay? That's what explains why I love soccer so much. My mother is Spanish. That also explains why I love soccer so much. And I am Venezuelan. That explains why I play so badly. but Argentinians, whenever they have a crisis, they never tell you they have a crisis. They just close the door. So you show up to your company and the door is closed. Say, what is going on? Oh, we close the door to minimize panic. And then you go to the bank. Oh, I would like to take my deposits out of the bank, and the door is closed. When you open, we're in holiday. Is national holiday? No, this is to eliminate panic. So you cannot tell someone in the middle of the crisis that we're just closing the door so you minimize the panic. Are you crazy? The door is closed. I want my money. There's more panic. When are you opening the door? No, don't worry. Calm down. No, but where's my money? Don't be so Argentinian. Calm down. No, that never works. You have to be very forceful, very clear about your actions. You have to be very transparent. This is the only way you are going to resolve the issue. You close the door, for example. We actually, after September 11, we stopped trading in the stock market. Because we don't want to trade in panic. I understand that. But the closing of the door comes with a message. And the message of the central bank and the message of the government after September 11 is, we are in control. And these are the measures we are going to implement. So then we open the bank in a state where we have clarified what has happened. We provide information when we close the door. We don't close the door and, we really don't know what is going on. So let me just close the door and see what happens later. No, that doesn't resolve the panic. Very interesting because in September 11 we did exactly that. By the way, we did that with Enron as well. When Enron collapsed, it's exactly the same policies in the United States. We have consistently done those policies for years and years and years in the United States, except the subprime crisis. Subprime crisis started, actually the central bank knows about this crisis in January of last year. Since January of last year, the answer has been, well, we don't know what's going on. What should we do? Well, just close the door. And I have checked in the Federal Reserve Board, and they don't have more Argentinians than normally, okay? Same number. So it's very interesting because there has been no actions from the fiscal side. We're just right now, a year and a half later, we're providing help to the individuals that actually defaulted. So you see, we're helping the wrong people, by the way. We should be helping the industry that is going through the crisis, not the individuals that in some form caused the crisis. So it's very interesting because it has taken a long, long time for the United States to resolve this issue. And my view of this is that the main problem is that there's a moral hazard argument. Is that it has been very difficult for the Bush administration and politics to resolve the issue that the individuals that are involved in the crisis may be misbehaved. Therefore, it's very difficult to help someone if I don't know if you misbehaved. If you misbehave, you reserve some punishment. So it has been very difficult for them to separate who have behaved properly from the ones that have not behaved properly to be able to provide the help. And therefore, we are lingering and lingering, trying to disentangle this. In the meanwhile, 280 million people are suffering and suffering because of inaction. And what I keep telling them is that, I understand you want to get the individuals that misbehave, but why 280 million people have to pay for your procedure? It should be much faster. If you cannot disentangle who has behaved from who hasn't misbehaved, forget about it, move on. Just provide the help. But it's very interesting that this particular crisis has been politically almost impossible to do that. With respect to inflation, again, as I said, this becomes very important the day this makes it to the news. So yeah, when it actually makes it to the cover of the economies, it has to be a very important problem, okay? So what has been important about this issue is that the presence of inflation in the world right now is threatening to be an instance in which we will have both inflation and very low growth. And in general, we don't know very well how to react to those. Truly, to be honest, we economists have no clue how to do that. By the way, if ever an economist tells you that he knows exactly how things are going to happen and what should be done, your immediate question should be how much money you have in your checking account. If the guy doesn't have $35 billion, he's BSing you, okay? He doesn't know. That guy's mostly like me. I knew there was going to be a crisis in the subprime crisis, but I was only 3.5 years wrong. So, so in general, we don't know how to deal with this issue. It's a very interesting aspect because it creates a lot of panic. Because the actions to reduce inflation are usually very bad for unemployment. And the actions that take care of unemployment are usually very bad for inflation. So when you have both unemployment and inflation, it's a very different animal. We don't know how to do that. So the second aspect is that the way and the place where inflation is taking place is unique. In the last 50 years, we have never had something like this. This is the first time actually food is rising faster than other goods. You know, I have data for 200 years of food prices in France. 200 years of data of France. The only times in which food increased faster, prices of food increased faster than anything else, were times of war. 1850, 1892, 1910, 11, 12, 1935, which is the Russian, 1940. That's it. Every other year, I mean, you understand this fluctuates up and down, but every other year, on average, food prices, if they rise less than anything else, except the last 2 years. And this is happening at a moment in time when we are in peace. So it's a very, very, I mean, this is the two parts of what is happening. Is that it's actually food, but our central banks don't pay attention to food. So let me just tell you a little bit of how the commodity prices. This is only 100 years of data. This is the price of food. And all the jumps here are the times when you have this issue. So usually the prices increase through wars, you see? It's all the wars. There was one time in 1975, and the reason why it increases is because we changed the numeraire. So that increase actually is not a true increase. I mean, this is not my fault, okay? It's all central bankers collecting crappy data. But anyway, but it's truly what is happening in the last 2 years. This you cannot blame on anything else. That increase is very scary. And in fact, I talked to central bankers to provide me a unique data set. It's the data they use to construct their CPIs. So for example, in the United States, there are a bunch of economists, analysts also, that collect 100,000 items, prices, every single month, item by item. So yes, they have, you know, this suit probably is there. And they collect the price of this suit on the city of Boston, you know, every single month until the suit disappears, and then they substitute that for another suit of the same quality, the same amount of hole, etc. So this is how you have to go to a judge and swear in front of a judge that you will never misuse that data. I have the data for almost 50 countries, so I have learned how to swear. Sorry, I mean, you mean the other swearing. In a lot of languages, okay? So I have been to all these statistical offices, and they have provided me with the data of how they construct it. And what I'm doing right now is trying to understand how the price of commodities is affecting individual items. So the price of bread in France, is that increasing at what speed? How large is the increase? How long it takes for the price to increase? So when wheat prices go up by 10%, how much of that makes it to the consumer that has bread? Not only bread, what about cookies, pasta, etc., all the items? On average, the country that has most information is Netherlands. They have 180,000 items. So I have to first learn a little bit of Dutch to translate it to something that I can read, and then actually look at the data of what is happening. So a lot of the work that Dave is referring is that I'm going through all this, and after I have sold my soul to all of them, so they can provide me with the data, now I'm going to all the places, just explaining what the results for each of the countries are. Unfortunately, only 3 countries allow me to share that information with you today, okay? So, I mean, I send emails to all of them. You have no idea how much the French freaked out just by asking the question. That was so funny. I mean, it was so, I thought that it was going to happen. Yes, it was so interesting. I just said an email, like, I'm going to have this presentation, you know, this is going to be kept confidential. We're going to tape the conference and then make it available to the web, which is true. Can I talk a little bit about what happens to the price of bread in France and, you know, all the other items? My God, the email was like, you swear that you were never going to use this data. Plus, you not only gave us your body, but your wife's. And I said, yeah. I said, yeah, that's exactly. I want you to take my wife out of here. So it didn't work. But what I'm going to do is to share some of the information of that. Actually, the countries that allow me to do this are the Latino countries. Can you imagine? I sent an email to Peru, and they said, yeah, you can share this with whoever. Who cares? In fact, this is so funny because it also tells you how kind of protective of information countries are. You have to go to a judge to ask for this data. Is that clear? No? This is super confidential. How the central bank constructs that inflation is super confidential. And Italy sent me the information on a spreadsheet by email. So, you know, I received an email, and I thought it was kind of, they were going to describe how I was going to have access to that. And then I opened it, and I see all the items in Italian, like, yeah, prosciutto, you know. All the items. These guys are crazy. On an email attached, no security whatsoever. It's just, yeah, bizarre. The Latinos sent me that in text, too. I mean, it was so funny. I asked one of my friends on the central bank in Peru. I said, yeah, no problem. Here it is. You don't want me to tell you how I'm going to use it? Oh, don't worry. But anyway, so the countries are Chile. These are where I have very close friends that I actually ask the favor. So it's Chile, Colombia, and Peru. But a lot of what I'm going to discuss today applies to everybody else. So even though the French are not allowing me to talk about this, when I speak with this accent, you know that I'm referring to France. Okay, so something very interesting that has changed dramatically, and I don't think people know this, but when you look at 200 years of data, usually oil prices are negatively correlated with food. If you look at the history, I mean, there was no oil in 1800s, okay? So just to let you know. But if you look at the time when we started actually trading oil, prices of oil and food have always been negatively correlated. When one goes up, the other one tends to go down. As I have continuously claimed, except the last 5 or 6 years. Since China and India are booming, the correlation between food and energy, who used to be negative, turned to positive, and consistently positive. This is every month. Correlation. Okay? Again, I want to emphasize how unique are the times as where we are right now in terms of the challenges of policy that we're facing. So this is what I do is I'm going to look at international commodity prices and try to understand how they impact retail prices, just to get some lessons. And the objective here is to, not only so I can tell you how the price of your food is going to go up, but also to understand how much inflation is in the system. I've already said that inflation is reaching 10% in a lot of countries. So I want to understand how much is in the system. And one of the things that I do, but I will not have time, is I discuss all the different channels, no? So how much of that happens to exchange rate, through fiscal policy, etc. So I'm going to just look at one of them. I construct indexes with all these items. You know, I look at rice in particular, to look at the price of rice, on rice, and then rice products like cereals. So every country has different component of rice, no, in the basket, and so on with bread and wheat. So let me just show you how it looks. This is this is in Spanish. Sorry. So for those that don't speak Spanish, this is a good time to learn. PAN means bread. Very interesting in Chile. When the price, this is a 1% increase in wheat. When the price of wheat goes up by 1%, or let's say 10%, okay, just to multiply all numbers by 10, the price of bread 18 months later goes up by 5%. Goes up by half of the increase of the wheat. Then comes down. But the point that I want to make here is that the tremendous delay, see, goes up, the first month goes up only by 20% of the shock, but then continues to go up for a long time. When you put Colombia takes more than 3 years to digest the international shock of commodity prices. And Peru is the same. It's a tremendous delay. Tremendous delays. This is 36 months. By the way, this is 50% of the shock. So if inflation in wheat has been 50%, that means the price of bread will go up by 25% 3 years from now. Okay? So then I do kind of, I'm going to do a movie now, so I can allow you to have questions. But then what is very interesting is that I compare this with other products. This is bread. The blue is bread. The other one is bread plus cookies. I mean, of course, that was a very important component for me. No? So, but, so I go through that. I go through different products of wheat and rice. These are the different components of food. So this is not only bread, but meat, and how much all these products are affected by the price of wheat. So the price of chicken, the price of meat, the price of all these items in Chile are roughly affected by the same amount independently of what they produce. This is an incredible fact about how all these prices are moving together, independently of their content of wheat. This is even the purple line here is housing. This is the price of housing in Chile being affected by the international price of wheat. And again, very interesting. You have between 12 to 18 month delay, and you have a very significant relationship or correlation. This is, oh, sorry. This is Colombia. And the same happens in Colombia. This is two different types of breads. This is breads and cereals. This is actually, I have different information in Colombia than Chile. Actually, I have the price of health and education in Colombia. So those are kind of equally affected by the price of wheat. Very surprising. And the same happens in Peru. The second aspect is I'm studying the price of oil and the impact of oil. And look at the very different pattern that happens in oil. In oil, there's no delay. When you change the price of oil, it almost makes it immediately to the CPI. So, and then I do the same stuff by the content of gasoline or oil and energy. I always love this, this graph on Peru. From Chile. Who's from Chile here? Raise your hand. And there's not a lot of people from Chile. But one humongous problem in Chile was the privatization or nationalization of public transportation. No? Do you Chileans have heard about that? Okay, yes. A little bit. Good. So one amazing aspect that happened in Chile is that public transportation used to be privately provided, no? In Chile. Now, you understand how we Latinos will do that, no? In a very disorganized fashion, no? So if there's a street where there's a lot of people that wants to get into a bus there, where do you want to have a lot of buses? On that street. So there's a lot of competition of buses on that street. Now, if you live in the suburbs, sorry, baby, you better bike, no? And I don't know if you have been in Santiago, but there's a lot of pollution. So biking actually is very bad for your health. So it was a complete disaster. In fact, if you're standing there and you see a bus coming and you raise your hand because you want actually to get in a bus, probably 5 of them crash in front of you. In fact, you know, Chileans have this incredible ability, leaping ability. They are all great basketball players because when they see their truck coming, they jump all over the place to escape from the trucks that are just heading toward them. So the government thought this was kind of inappropriate. The second aspect, this was incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. So the competition was not making it cheaper. It was extremely expensive. It was inefficient and expensive. And the Chilean government loves this graph because this also proves the lack of competition. When the price of gasoline or the price of oil goes up by 10%, what the blue line on top says is that the price of gasoline at the pump in Chile goes up by 25% of that shock. Okay? So if oil goes up by 10, what this is telling you is that the price at the pump increases by 2.5%. Now, you understand that the amount of, or the content of oil in the gasoline is a lot, no? Is that kind of a reasonable assumption? Okay. So if I compare the content of oil in the production of public transportation, will that be more or less gasoline? will be less, no? Because not only I have the gasoline, but I need a conductor and the driver, and actually you need the bus. So what is very interesting is that if the gas increases by 2.5% because oil increased by 10, the price of public transportation in Chile was increasing by 2.5%. It's too big of a pass-through, you see? How is that possible? You have a very small component of oil. How can you pass through so much? And this is the cost of private transportation. This is actually the cost of how much increases renting a car, etc. So there was a tremendous difference. And in fact, Chile, this is not publicly released, but they said, yeah, we actually intervene in a market that deserves tremendous amount of intervention. There's no justification for these prices. Anyway, so let me just conclude so I can give you some but what is very interesting about this is I analyzed Peru, and all of them have more or less the same things to do. This is the number of countries I have, so your country probably is here. If your country is not here, it's because they are really nasty and they have not provided the data. So if you are from Argentina or Venezuela, they are not providing the data. And the main reason is because in Argentina they are manipulating the statistics, so they don't want me to say that publicly. Oops, sorry. So they don't want to release the data. So because they don't want to release the data, I am collecting my own data. This is what you do. I'm very entrepreneurial, and I would love to make the life of Argentinians really miserable. So, that's what my dad did for 20 years. It deserves some payback now. So, but what is truly interesting is that the countries that have not provided me the data in general have been countries that are actually controlling prices internally. Venezuela and Argentina would be the two best examples. So this is all the list, so almost all the countries. So let me just tell you some of the conclusions that I can say. It's very interesting that the prices of food have a tremendous amount of delay. Some countries, the most competitive countries, okay, the delay will be between 12 and 16 months. What that means is that the inflation you are seeing today in those countries, like United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, most of the European countries, that inflation is what happened a year ago. Because prices have continued increasing, we will see more inflation. But it's 1 year. The least competitive countries in the world, those countries have a much bigger delay, similar to Peru and Colombia. It's between 24 to 36 months. That's you draw your own conclusions. So it is very interesting because what that means is that the inflation rate for countries that are relatively close, what you're seeing today is what has not happened yet. So for countries, this is countries like China, India, they're very non-competitive in the retail industry. Those countries, if something's going to happen, is that more and more inflation is coming down the pipeline. That means that responsible central bankers should be and must be increasing interest rates in the future. This is what actually a responsible central banker should do. That they have to take care of the fact that we are going to face more than 10% inflation in the next couple of years. The second aspect is that I think central bankers are responding to the fact that this inflation is taking place in food. Mainly because this has tremendous distributional problems. You have countries like Indonesia, where you already have riots because food prices are rising too fast. So even though central bankers do not want to control the price of food, or they think they cannot control the price of food, the fact that your citizens are complaining in that regard means that you actually have to do something. So this is very different from the responses of oil prices and gas prices. These are the inflation we are used to, okay? This is the one that we have been dealing since the 70s, because this is the one that we have every single month. Every time there's a disruption in supply, we have oil prices go up. We know how to deal with this. What is very interesting is that from the 48 countries, this is identical to all the countries. They all look the same. Inflation goes up 9 to 12 months. They all go roughly in the same amount of the same. It's all of them is 25%, independently of the country, independently of the degree of competition, independently of whether or not they like Republicans or Democrats. Okay? Independent. It's absolutely independent. But food depends tremendously on how our economies are organized. And that actually changes significantly. The more competitive countries will have a much better way of dealing with this. Let me take questions before I leave you. Yes?
Notice that you excluded the U.S. from all the discussion of inflation.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that? And the second one would be, why is the data so confidential? Does it matter?
I have no, so let me answer the second question. I have no idea why the data is so confidential, but they are really scared, I have to tell you. Really, really scared. I asked them why. And they mostly answered, well, we have always been very scared, so it's good to continue being scared. So now, what is absolutely confidential is the weight. So forget about the prices of individual items. When the central bank tells you how each price is weighed in their basket, they are telling you which citizens they care. Is that clear? They don't want to tell you that they care about you, but not you. That is actually a very important policy aspect. So a part of this information, I actually have the true weight. So part of what makes this data so confidential is this one. The second one is that in sometimes, you can manipulate the data. So the reason is the following. If I have the price of water, okay, this is water, I can't read, 0.5 liters, okay? If I change the item to water 250 milliliters, there's a discontinuation on the items. Is that clear? You know, this is the price, $1, $1, $1. Then the next month, I discontinue this item and I introduce an item 250. Imagine that in the next month, I put 500, then 250, 500, 250. You see, I am breaking the line of water prices. Is that clear? So if this guy is going up by 100%, in the index doesn't show. And a lot of countries do that. A lot of countries. Very depressing. So, you see, when I have access to the true data, I complete. You know, in the Jerry Maguire view, you complete me? No. So I complete the series because the fact that 1 month is missing, I don't care about 1 month missing, you see? So my inflation rates are very different from the inflation rates they actually report to you. By the way, the crappier the country, the more likely they are manipulating. So Argentina manipulates like crazy. Venezuela, my brother, we have no idea. There's not a single item that replicates. Frank, one.
Yeah, can you just comment on how you untangle correlation from causation? I was very interested you were able to say price peak, spike here 30 months later, but of course there's a continuous chain of changes. And further you were saying, well, education is correlated with oil. I'm like, well, how do you figure that out versus just causation?
Well, the easy answer to do it fast is because I'm a genius. No.
Yeah, show your work.
Yeah, exactly. I am also very modest. No, no, actually, no. The econometric techniques are not easy because I want to answer that question properly. Okay, so if I promise you that when the paper is released, will be in my webpage. And yes, one agreement that I have with all the central bankers is that after they have made this, after I have gone through the tour of policies, I will be able to write the paper to make an academic paper. So I will describe the methodology. It's not trivial to answer that question. But what happens is that when you try to answer that question properly, you get the right answer. The US, I have access to the data. Sorry, I forgot to add that. I have access to the data on the US, but I have not actually seen the data yet. They said, yeah, we will allow you to have the data. And then they asked me, Roberto, you have become full professor. So what does that mean? I said, well, that means that now I can be lazy. Means that all my research will be useless. Means that I will cause a lot of misery on others. And they look at me and say, so you have become Bill Clinton. So they are not allowing me to access the data until I change. So unfortunately, we don't have more time. I have to finish at 9:55 on the dot, and it's 9:57. I'll be outside for any questions. This is actually one of my greatest passions in the last years. So I love to talk about it. And thank you so much for coming so early. It's a great pleasure for me. This is one of the highlights every year, is to actually be able to see all of you guys again. For me, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to be here. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Good, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks to Roberto for kicking us off in such grand fashion. I just have two quick personal takeaways, and they are correlated and maybe, to Frank's point, even causally related. One is, it's my 25th reunion. I'm here hosting Back to the Future. Well, I'm going to be here on my 50th reunion, still hosting Back to the Classroom and Back to the Future, because I won't be able to afford to retire anytime before then. But secondly, if we're going to hell in a handbasket, I want Roberto around, because at least we're going to enjoy the journey. Thank you very much.